Hi everyone, welcome to As Brave as You, chapter 17. I'm going to tell you that we're reading this again with permission from our publisher. I will be reading chapter 17. You will have discussion questions to participate with in Schoology after. You'll see them next to this video. Remember, as always, if you have some post-it notes to help you jot down some things as you're reading, that would be helpful and great. We have chapter 17, 18, 19, and 20, and what I want you to do, in addition to just listening, either this chapter or the next chapter, but what I want you to do is find a scratch of paper similar to what we've done in the classroom before. Is I want you to include the story elements, and I'll take a picture of this and put it in Schoology for you, but I want you to include the characters, which are Ernie and Jeannie, Grandma, Grandpa, Mom, Dad, Tess, and Crab. Our setting, which changes from time to time. They were initially in the house with their grandparents in the South in Virginia, and they have been to the woods, which is another part of the setting. The house in the woods, a different part of the setting. The plot, the events, things that have happened is that they went to visit their grandparents. I'm scooting ahead now to the conflict from the last chapter we just read. A main conflict was that Grandpa was trying to teach Ernie how to shoot a gun on his 14th birthday, and Ernie was really afraid, and the gun kicked back and knocked his 3 teeth out. So we're going to figure out how things get resolved as the story goes. But if you'd like to start this for this chapter, that would be great. You're going to be doing this between chapters 17 and 18, and I will again put this in Schoology. Chapter 17, here we go. Get comfortable and ready to listen. Chapter 17. The teeth can reconnect them to the gums? How? The doctor said that when they're connected to the other teeth around them, they can do it. Weird. Why did Grandma make me put Ernie's teeth in milk? What? Should I have put Michael Jackson in milk to save him? Should I be drinking milk more often? I hate it that milk makes me poop. And why are fang teeth called cuspids? Cuspid sounds like Cupid. Love bites. And what if Ma and Dad's trip was ruined, and what if they get divorced, and then it's my fault because I was the only one who really wanted Ernie to shoot that gun? What causes a kickback anyway? I wish Ernie could kick that kickback back. How much do you really need sunglasses? And Ernie, how much do they cost? Ernie got $100 from Ma and Dad for his birthday, so at least he'll be able to replace the ones that were broken. Or maybe he can just fix that with his chipped teeth. Jeannie sat his pen down and he snaked the spiraled wire out of the first few holes of his notebook, holding it up to his mouth, trying to imagine what it felt like to be Ernie. He'd stayed upstairs with him most of the day. He figured that if it were him who had his teeth knocked out, he'd want Ernie around, even if he didn't want to talk. And Ernie didn't want to talk. That was fine with Jeannie. He spent the rest of the day thinking and scribbling questions in between running down to the kitchen for snacks, soft snacks, like applesauce and pudding. Man, even with a busted mouth, Ernie still ate a lot. Ernie fell asleep early that night for the first time ever, and Jeannie was glad to hear him snore. He had been 14 for one day, and it was the worst day of his life. So, to hear him calling the hogs, as Dad would say, and not be in much pain thanks to the medicine Grandma had given him, was good. Did you catch the idiom? Calling hogs, which is what he means by snoring. But it was loud, and in between each snore, Jeannie could hear a familiar clicking coming up from the floor from the kitchen. Grandpa was up, and Jeannie didn't know if Grandpa would be in a talking mood. And actually, Jeannie wasn't sure if he wanted to talk to Grandpa after everything that happened. But he was kind of hungry, so maybe he should just have some ice cream and just sit down there until he got sleepy. So when Jeannie got downstairs, Grandpa was there, just as Jeannie suspected, sunglasses on, disassembling his gun again, twisting the screws, yanking and pulling on the revolver. Jeannie stood at the entranceway, and all of a sudden he was kind of nervous. What is it? Grandpa grumped. You want to be alone? Grandpa stopped fooling around at the pistol, and he kicked Jeannie's chair out from under the table. You sure you want my company? Jeannie didn't answer, but because he wasn't sure that he actually did. As far as he was concerned, this was pretty much mostly Grandpa's fault. How come Grandpa couldn't tell that Ernie was scared? How come he couldn't hear that? Be as mad as Jeannie at Grandpa? But as mad as Jeannie was at Grandpa, the truth of it was that he was also mad at himself. He knew Ernie had been scared, and he egged him on anyway. So Jeannie knew that he had messed up too, and not just with Ernie. The only difference was that Grandpa didn't know about some of it, but Michael Jackson. So Jeannie figured out that he and Grandpa could be bad guys together, and he slid into his seat. Then Grandpa went to breaking the gun down. Jeannie could still smell that liquor. He looked at the pieces of the gun on the table and he realized it was the first time he didn't want to touch it, not even a little bit. He didn't have any questions that he wanted to ask, and he didn't want to learn about it, and he didn't want to shoot anymore. And he came to the conclusion that when he had become a man, and if he had to become a man, getting his teeth knocked out, it was fine just being a kid forever. Once Grandpop had that gun completely apart, he lined up the screws and the bits of the metal that were all on the table like Jeannie always did when he was about to start building a model car. Then Grandpop ran his fingers along them. Then he guzzled the rest of his drink and he cleared his throat. "Littlewood," he whispered, "yeah? Could you take me outside?" Could. Jeannie wasn't sure that he wanted to now, but then the image of Grandpop crawling around in the grass and the leaves, slapping his hands on the ground, trying to get Ernie to come back, that vision came back. How all Grandpop's fear of outside, of the unknown, disappeared when he heard his grandson cry out. "Don't you want to put the gun back together first?" Grandpop just tipped his glass nearly upside down to get those last few drops. "No," he said. Down the porch steps and into the yard, Grandpop barely held Jeannie's shoulder, except for the occasional touch for balance. He counted each step as usual, 17 to the middle of the yard. Now there were 12 steps to the left, putting them right around where Crab always parked. They paused. The crickets were crazy loud, which was a good thing, because otherwise it would have been weird, with neither Jeannie nor Grandpop saying anything. Finally, Grandpop asked, "Littlewood, tell me, are the stars out tonight?" Jeannie looked up. Not even one. Not one star. Even the moon was mostly covered by clouds. "No," he said. Grandpop grunted. "Good, then let's just stand here till it rains." "Until it rains?" Jeannie wasn't really getting wet for no reason. "Well, what if it doesn't?" he added, also worried that they'd be hanging out outside all night. "It will. I smell it." Grandpop took a deep breath. Sure enough, not 5 minutes later, it came down hard and cold, and Jeannie wanted to go in, but Grandpop wasn't budging. So they just stood there, letting the rain wash over them. Jeannie couldn't tell for sure, but they were both soaked. But he didn't think all the water on Grandpop's face was just from the sky. Things at Grandma and Grandpop's were pretty awkward for the next few days, and Crab didn't show his face. A good thing. Grandma might have jumped on him if she saw him. Ernie eventually came down from his bedroom, even started going back outside again, but he refused to see Tess, even though Jeannie was pretty sure Tess wouldn't give a hoot about how Ernie looked. He spent most of his time with Samantha, playing fetch with this toy. Jeannie could tell that he was keeping an ear out for Tess, just in case she decided to come up the hill, so he could make it back to the house before she saw him. Jeannie didn't wait around for Ernie to get out of his funk. He couldn't afford to. He still had things he had to take care of, like figuring out how to fix that wheel on the model truck, and even more important, taking care of catching a new Michael Jackson. So while Ernie let Samantha lick his sadness away, Jeannie, on day 16, ventured off to the yellow house to check the trap. This is the first time he'd be going there by himself, and he was kind of nervous. And we went a little crazy, swinging his trusty stick in front of him, swiping away the invisible webs that might have been homes to poisonous spiders, scaring away any lurking poisonous snakes. And, big bummer, the trap was empty. The box was down, but nothing inside of it, and it was mostly likely blown down by a breeze. Day 17, the trap was still standing, even if the wind was not interested in it. Day 18, Jeannie had in fact caught something, but not what he was hoping for. It was a squirrel. If Grandpop had taken a liking to squirrels and not birds, this would have been a much easier task, but luckily, squirrels didn't like to be interested in flies, so at least the bait was still there. Whenever he was traipsing through the woods, which was less and less scary each time, Jeannie would pop in and out of the inside-outside room to keep up with his duties. Grandpa practically lived in there now, like he was hiding from everyone, like a broken bird in a bird cage. And whenever Jeannie came in to tend with the photos or clean up or feed the little birds, pretending that there were 5, not 4, Grandpa would ask him to leave. One time he even barked at Jeannie, scaring him half to death. "I'm sorry, son, I'm sorry," Grandpa said, running his hand across his forehead. I know you're just helping out, and I'm very appreciative. So I came in to do it, but once you've done it, you gotta let me be." Let him be? Let him be what? Sad? Guilty? Part of Jeannie didn't really want to be around Grandpop anyway, but another part of him did, because he understood those feelings too. It seemed to Jeannie like Grandpop and Grandma sort of switched places. Now Grandma and Jeannie were together most of the time, mainly because they were the only 2 people in the house that were still talking. Grandma was on a cooking frenzy, making all kinds of crazy soups so that Ernie wouldn't hurt his teeth on anything hard. Turned Jeannie into a sous chef, she called it, which was just a fancy word for helper. When Grandma had finished up whatever soup she had been making, out of whatever was growing from her garden, she and Jeannie would play MASH. You know the game, MASH, that his mother taught him, where the point was to randomly decide your life, like who you're going to be with, your job, where you're going to live, your car. The best part, whether you live in a mansion, apartment, a shack, or a house, the rules were simple. Create a list of each category, MASH. Choose a random number, something above 10. Count through the list, crossing off whichever your number lands on. Repeat that, and then count until only one item in your category is left, and that's your life. MASH. Girls, jobs, places, cars. Shelley, detective, Brooklyn, Mustang, mansion. Shelley, firework, namer. China, dads, Honda, shack. Shelley, mechanic, Jamaica, spaceship, apartment. Shelley, firefighter, Brooklyn, school, house. Jeannie's best future, according to MASH, with a count of 21, was where he lived in a mansion in Brooklyn, he drove a Mustang, he worked as Detective Littlewood, and he was married to, of course, the one and only Shelley. Not bad at all. Then one morning on day 21, Ernie and Jeannie picked peas. Yes, Ernie was still expected to do chores. Jeannie was in the kitchen, ripping a page out of his notebook, MASH version 8, when Grandma plunked something down in front of him. And Jeannie did a double take. It was a book. The book that Grandma was always reading in her bedroom. Let's have a look, she said, opening the cover, and inside it was full of pictures of Dad and Uncle Wood when they were kids. Pictures of Grandma and Grandpop when he could see. Weird without seeing sunglasses on him. And even some pictures of Jeannie and Ernie when they were really little. But most importantly, there was a letter. The letter. The one from Uncle Wood when he was heading to Kuwait. A crinkled piece of paper with blue writing on it. See if you can read that, Grandma said to Ernie. It was hard because the words were smudged and smeared like she said. Plus, he was kind of nervous. But Grandma was watching him expectantly. So Jeannie said, it says, Dear Mama. This was the easiest part to make out. I hope that you and Pop are. Then he got stuck. The next words looked like on fire, but that didn't make sense. Fine, Grandma prompted. We are fine. She leaned against the refrigerator and continued on without looking at the book. She had it all memorized. I'm writing because I have bad news. My unit got called, and in a few days I am going into battle. Her voice started to wobble, and Jeannie didn't want to hear any more, but he didn't want to see her cry. He goes on about how he feels trapped there because there was no way out of the decision. And down at the bottom, he says, whatever you do, don't tell Ernest I'm scared. Just tell him I love him. Grandma pressed her eyes, and then she came back to the table and closed the book. He was your daddy's hero. Sometimes I think into the army just so that Ernest wouldn't have to. He took the hit. Jeannie thought about Ernie and about how Ernie always did everything first just to make sure it was okay. From simple things like tasting the weird foods first, to being the first one to do things when they were walking through the woods, or even back in Brooklyn, how Ernie always took up for Jeannie, fought his fights for him, even the ones he didn't have to. Ernie fought those too. And now Jeannie wondered if Ernie had taken this hit for him. If Ernie knew that Jeannie was fascinated by learning to shoot, he would test it out for him, make sure it was okay, even if that meant doing something he didn't want to do, something he was scared to do. He wondered. About an hour later, Grandma appeared, announced that they were going to the market. She had enough peas, but Ernie refused. Why not? I need both you boys. I ain't going, he repeated. Jeannie can handle it. Jeannie perked up. Well, can you at least help me pack it up and get it into the car? And she winked at Jeannie. Jeannie is strong. He is, but you're stronger. Just help me get in the car and I'll take Jeannie with me. See, all Ernie had been doing besides his chores was moping around, playing with the dog, saying nothing, and even when he did, he pulled his t-shirt over his face like a ninja mask. So Grandma was smart. She was trying to get Ernie off his duff. Ernie helped load all the peas in Grandma's back seat, the sun blinding him, making him squint. Ernie without sunglasses just wasn't Ernie. He still refused to actually go to the market, though. Once Grandma and Jeannie got there, which of course involved super loud church music and Grandma saying, gotta play it loud enough for God to hear it so then he can send people to come buy those peas, they lugged the baskets over to the table. That Mr. Binks guy was setting up his table right next to theirs. This time he had on sweatpants, they were way too small, and a pink shirt with a red tie, and on his feet roller skates. He was pulling wooden boxes out of a bag, as well as a whole bunch of glass jars, the kind that Jeannie drank sweet tea out of. Once the old guy caught Jeannie looking at him, he flashed a smile. Then he opened the boxes. Jeannie craned his neck to see. The boxes were full of teeth. Jeannie'd forgotten all about that. Teeth on top of teeth on top of teeth. Mr. Binks rolled around the table, setting the teeth up in cases like rings at a jewelry store. And in the glass jars were even more of them. Hey now, Mary, Teeth Man, which Jeannie decided to call him at that moment. Morning, Blinks. You remember my grandson, Jeannie? Jeannie, of course I remember. Remember you promised the first one was a shake, so from now on high fives, right? Jeannie smiled. Then he and Binks did the most awkward high five ever, but it was still a five. The guy was weird. Selling teeth, definitely creepy. But Jeannie still kind of liked him. Where's the big man? Teeth asked. Ernie? He couldn't make it today. He had an accident about a week ago. An accident? There was genuine concern in the teeth man's voice. Yeah, he was learning how to shoot, and the gun accidentally jumped out of his hand and punched him in the mouth. Jeannie blurted it. Then it was like he couldn't control himself. He just kept going. It knocked out his teeth. Then, realizing that this wasn't the complete truth, he corrected himself. Well, really 2.5 teeth. Jeannie glanced over at Grandma, who was glaring back at him with the strangest look on his face. Sorry, Jeannie shrugged. That is what happened. I know what happened, Jeannie. She turned to the teeth man and frowned. There it is, Doc, all the family business laid out like family dinner. But Teeth Man seemed more concerned with whether Ernie was all right. He's fine. It was July 4th, so I had to take him down to the emergency room and they got it all taken care of. But the poor thing is too embarrassed to leave the house. So it's just me and Peanut Head here today. Peanut Head, jeez. What they do, split them? Grandma nodded. How many? 2? A third was chipped, and they said they couldn't do anything with that one. Oh, that's the half. Gotcha. Right, said Jeannie. And were the teeth stable while they were in the splint? He's not complaining right now, is he? No, he seems pretty sturdy, and an old friend of mine did it, and I trust her. She said it should be just fine. Okay, that's good, Mary. That's good. If she splinted him already, he should be as good as new. And I don't know, in maybe a month? Teeth Man's voice was so warm and so concerned. He shook his head. Then he added, I'll tell you one thing. Thank the Lord for old friends. Then he began turning the jars of teeth half in one direction, half in another, until they were all lined up perfectly. Every jar had a different label, like athlete or show star or movie star. Jeannie was glad he didn't have one called little boys, because then he would have had to talk the teeth man to the rest of the day with his hand over his mouth, so that he couldn't get any ideas about adding any of Jeannie's teeth to this collection. Grandma watched, opening her mouth, then closing it, then opening it. It was like she was trying to say something, but the words weren't there. Finally, she said, Binks, I don't know how to ask you this, but see, my old friend who rigged up the splint said that Ernie would eventually need to see somebody to make sure. You want a second opinion? Teeth Man cut her off. Of course I'll take a look. Then Teeth Man cheesed, and then he rolled over to the other side of the table. His smile looked like something out of a toothpaste commercial, even though the rest of him looked like something out of a circus. I would really appreciate it, Grandma said. Just for a double dose of peace of mind. I know you're really busy, but I just want to make sure. Happy to. Call my office as soon as I get in. I will. Grandma was nodding. Yes, yes, yes. Jeannie was trying hard to shake his head. No, no, no. He liked this guy, but he didn't know if he liked him well enough to trust him with his brother's mouth. Dude sold teeth. So he couldn't help himself. He had to ask. Is he going to take out more teeth out of Ernie's mouth? No, baby, Grandma said. Well, is he going to add teeth to Ernie's mouth, like the ones that he has laying around? Again, he tried to keep the words under his breath, but the teeth man heard him and laughed. No, of course not, he said. No, of course not, he said. I just want to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And look at that chipped tooth, and maybe we'll have to put a crown on it, that's all. Mary, set it up before the day is over. A crown? Well, that sounded pretty promising. Actually, Ernie would have said a king mouth? Awesome. Then it was back to work. Not in the store, not on the street. You ain't never seen a pea this sweet. Grandma hollered with her usual cheer. And just like last time, people came rushing over to Grandma's table, snatching up all the peas, which Jeannie carefully weighed. And in an hour, the baskets were nearly empty. Teeth Man, however, hadn't seen the same luck with his collection, but he was showing a couple this one tooth and telling them the story behind it. Yes, Michael came in and he said it was bothering him, so he could barely dribble the ball. That's crazy, so you took it out, he said. Then he kept looking over at his girlfriend, his eyes bugging. Not me, I wasn't Mike's dentist. It was a friend of mine. I traded him for a Miles Davis, Teeth Man said. Jeannie didn't know who Miles Davis was, but the people at the table sure did. So how much for the Jordan? Teeth Man rolled the tooth around the palm of his hand, examining it. It's just a wisdom tooth, so nothing crazy. $20 sound fair? The guy forked over a $20 bill. Teeth Man put the Jordan in a tiny bag and handed it over. Soon as the couple walked away, the guy already opened up the bag to stare some more at the tooth. You can really sell a tooth for $20? Teeth Man lit up. That's a cheap one, he said. This baby could go for $1,000. So the teeth were his babies. Made sense. At the same time, $2,000 for somebody's nasty old tooth? Dang, not just somebody, he said to the son. This one came out of Babe Ruth's front teeth. This got knocked out by a bartender. Whoa, Babe Ruth, how'd you get it? My grandfather was the bartender. He showed Jeannie this tooth, mainly from people whose names he had heard about, but some he didn't know. Finally just said, you got any ninja teeth? Ninjas? Yeah, like fighters, karate people, anyone like that? Teeth Man's eyes just lit right up. Well, yes, I do right here, he said. He pointed to this yellowish one. It was small. This one here is Bruce Lee's. Must have been Bruce's baby teeth or something, because it was tiny. You're a fan? Teeth Man asked. Yeah, not as much as my brother. Someday, he wants to be able to fight just like him. Better than him. How much for it? Ginny asked the big man, even though he only had $10, the same $10 Grandma gave him from the first trip to the market, but he wanted to know. I'll tell you what. Teeth Man leaned in close. I'll trade you. You get your granny to give me some of those peas, and this tooth is yours. I'm going to pause right here. And I'm going to finish it up in a little bit. You guys, it's a long time. It's 20 minutes. It's almost the end of chapter 17. I want you to go into Schoology after you read this, and I'm going to have some questions there for you and discuss. All right? Thanks, everyone.